Coach Sully, this is Matt Chat. Today I wanted to talk about the importance of repetition. Repetition is important because it develops what we call muscle memory. And muscle memory is necessary in order to develop a skill. We want to make sure that we're doing something when we're trying to perfect something, when we're trying to master an activity. We have to do it over and over and over and over again in order to remove it from our conscience and put it into our subconscious. Mastery is when you are able to do something without deliberate thought. That means it happens automatically. And then when we're talking about particularly self-defense, we don't want to have to think about the task at hand. We need it to happen automatically. When we're in a stressful situation, in a self-defense situation, first of all, when you're in a high stress situation, when you get that adrenaline dump, what happens is your brain kind of gets tunnel vision and it's unable to recall, it's unable to process things logically, it's unable to think through things. It's basically setting you up to act on instinct. It's removing the element of thought from the equation so there's no time wasted and you can act. But in order to have a skill set that you can rely on, it needs to be ingrained into your muscle memory. It needs to be done repeatedly over and over and over again. When you look at high-level athletes, particularly, and as far as physical capabilities are concerned, the high-level athlete is really the epitome of physical capability. They develop their skill set to a point where it happens automatically. They develop their skill set to a level that's beyond anybody else. It's basically mastery. So when we're in the self-defense arena, in the martial arts arena, we want to look to the people who perform at the highest level and imitate them. We want to be able to rely on our skill set without thought. So we have to incorporate repetition. As a matter of fact, repetition needs to be the foundation of our work in order for us to develop the mastery necessary to perform these physical tasks under duress, particularly. A lot of times, because in a lot of martial arts academies, the competition aspect may not be at the forefront. So a lot of times they get away from the importance of repetition. And sometimes they don't want to bore their students to death by having them do the same thing over and over again. But I think, eventually taking the method of hiding the repetitions, eventually you get there, you get to a point of mastery. But I think that it's a good idea to embrace that aspect of physical development. And when you embrace that aspect of physical development, you actually are able to overcome the boredom that you're trying to avoid in the first place. There's no way around repetition. Reps, 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 reps. You gotta get them in. But I think a huge mistake that a lot of martial arts academies, because most martial arts academies, most of the people in there are not competitors. Most of the people are in there to get in shape. But I think that they also want to develop a skill that they can lean on if they need to defend themselves. And I think if we don't highlight the importance of repetition, we're giving these martial artists a false sense of security. Even if you are able to particularly do the move, or you understand all the ins and outs of the move, if that move isn't ingrained into your muscles, you still won't be able to perform it, particularly in a high stress situation, in a self-defense situation. So I think embracing the repetition aspect of martial arts is very important. Sometimes you'll go to classes and not even break a sweat. And I think that's a huge mistake. We're training people to be able to do a physical activity. We're claiming to develop a physical talent. And if we are cutting corners in the repetition aspect of it, I think we're selling our students and our members short. So repetition, embrace the repetition. Embrace doing it over and over and over and over again. And when you embrace it, what happens is you start to find those small pockets of creativity. That's where true creativity, that's where true artistry lies. I'm always comparing martial arts to music, but music is the same way. You know, you can pick up your instrument and just do whatever, which takes a level of proficiency. But when you have that musician and that artist that can stick to a structured format and find their creativity in those small little areas, I think that that's a more advanced and a more capable and a more proficient artist. And the same thing applies when it comes to martial arts and self-defense. I know personally, I wasn't able to control my development as a martial artist until I embraced the repetition, until I put aside a session and worked on my jab for an hour at a time, 45 minutes at a time, just the jab, just the cross, just the jab cross, just the footwork. And at the beginning, it could be a little boring, but eventually you will start to find wonder. You will start to find freedom in the monotony of repetition. And again, you look at these athletes that are performing at the highest level, all of them, repetition is the foundation for everything that they're doing, and is the foundation for their development. So us as martial artists, even if we're not doing it at the competitive level, we should imitate the people that are doing it at the highest level. And us as coaches and instructors, We should not candy coat the importance of repetition with our students. We should throw them into that pool ASAP. We should not give them the false illusion that they can develop any sort of skill without the repetitions necessary. Repetition, repetition, repetition. And it's one of the main reasons that I designed my program the way that I did. And while I was designing my program, working it out and figuring out how to do it, that I did have a huge apprehension to doing the same thing over and over again, or trying to get students and members to do the same thing over and over again. But what I discovered is that the boredom that we're trying to avoid by running away from the repetitions, it's not as big of a deal as we think it is. That student is going to get an excellent workout, first of all, and they're going to start to see improvements in their technique real time, quickly. If there should never be a case where a student has gone weeks without throwing their jab hundreds of times, if they're showing up to class twice a week. We don't need to, I don't think it's necessary to mask and hide the reps. Embrace the reps. Let the students know early that repetition is what is going to be necessary to develop the mastery that they're looking to develop. And what happens is that students will go through the program, and then once they get to a certain level, have to come back and get the reps that they skipped. I know I had to do it. In order for me to develop simple, basic punches that I had been using for years, I had to scale back. I had to go back to the basics and work those punches over and over, throwing them at a target, throwing them in shadowboxing situations and scenarios. So don't run away from those reps. Reps, reps, reps. All right, guys. That was Matt Chat, Coach Sully, Reps and Sweat Martial Arts and Fitness. This was Matt Chat.